Is a little bit of encapsulation of Nazarene Youth Conference that was in Salt Lake City a week ago, and we had some of our students there with almost 11,000 other Nazarene young people. 3 years from now is the next Nazarene Youth Conference. It's going to be in Houston. Yes, Houston in the summer, especially beautiful in the summer. If you are presently, or if you have a son or daughter or grandson or granddaughter that is 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th grade right now, they'll be eligible for NYC 3 years from now. And I would love to talk to you about that event. We've only got 3 short years to prepare. I'm not sure if I mentioned it, but be in prayer for Brandon Thompson. Chris, did I mention Brandon? Did I say Brandon? Be in prayer for Brandon. He's got surgery coming up. And if you, and this is a complete aside, if you know a tree or limb person, if you know a tree person, come talk to me. We've got a church family in need, and we've got tree needs. Okay, Daniel chapter 6. Open up your Bibles to Daniel chapter 6. We're finishing our summer look at the story of Daniel. There's more there, but we're finishing it today, kinda. Several years ago, there are always commencement speeches in the spring. There, every high school, every college, every university has commencement speeches, and this is Admiral William McRaven. Anybody recognize Admiral William McRaven? He is the bullfrog, or was the bullfrog. And everybody knows what the bullfrog is, right? Okay. He's a Navy admiral. He was a Navy SEAL. And back to the World War II era, Navy SEALs were called frogmen. And the longest serving active duty SEAL is called the bullfrog. And for several years, he was the bullfrog. He had been a Navy SEAL for over 30 years, active duty. He spoke at the University of Texas, I think it was 2014, and he was challenging the graduates, but he was from there. He was a graduate from Texas, Austin, and he was challenging them, like every other commencement speech, to go out and change your world. And he gave 10 points that day, and from that commencement speech, there was a book, and then from that book, there was another book, and I've read a couple of those. I think Matt made me read at least one of those, but there was one called The Wisdom of the Bullfrog, and they basically made a book out of this commencement speech, and you can watch it in 20 minutes on YouTube. Very valuable, but this is how his talk started. Every morning in basic SEAL training, my instructors, who at the time were all Vietnam veterans, would show up in my barracks room, and the first thing they would inspect was your bed. If you did it right, the corners would be square, the covers pulled tight, the pillow centered just under the headboard, and the extra blanket folded neatly at the foot of the rack. That's Navy talk for bed. It was a simple task, mundane at best, but every morning we were required to make our bed to perfection. It seemed a little ridiculous at the time, particularly in the light of the fact that we were aspiring to be real warriors, tough, battle-hardened SEALs. But the wisdom of this simple act has been proven to me many times over. If you make your bed every morning, you will have accomplished the first task of the day. It will give you a small sense of pride, and it will encourage you to do another task, and another, and another. By the end of the day, that one task completed will have turned into many tasks completed. Making your bed will also reinforce the fact that the little things in life matter. If you can't do the little things right, you'll never do the big things right. And if, by chance, you have a miserable day, you'll come home to a bed that is made, that you made. And a made bed gives you encouragement that tomorrow might be better. So, if you want to change the world, start off by making your bed. His speech is gold. Give it 20 minutes. It's great. But for some reason, as I was preparing for this message, and this message, this is a banger. This is another great story. If you've ever been to Sunday school ever in your life, chances are you know this story. It's Daniel in the lion's den. Ring a bell? Daniel in the lion's den. Spoiler, he lives. It's pretty awesome. As we talked about last week, when we looked at Daniel 5, Daniel isn't a young man. He's probably now in his 80s. Daniel and his friends were taken from their homeland when Babylon came in and besieged and defeated Judah. And probably when they were teenagers and they were taken off into exile. They were marched hundreds of miles away from their home in Jerusalem. And as far as we know, they never returned home. And now probably in his 80s. Now, Daniel starts chapter 1, they're teenagers. And then in chapter 2, probably around 20. In chapter 3, maybe around 30. Chapter 4 and 5, maybe around 50. And in late 70s, maybe 80. And they've worked in Babylon for the Babylonians for now generations. And Daniel, more than likely, is in his 80s. He's worked for the government. He was forced to learn a new language and learn new customs and work for the country that defeated him and his people. And he's worked now for generations, for decades, for the Babylonians. The Babylonian kingdom falls at the end of chapter 5, and the Medes and the Persians have come in and taken over Babylon. He's still in Babylon. And chapter 6 probably takes place a few months after the Medo-Persian Empire comes and takes over in Babylon, maybe a year, but he's still in his 80s. And I want us to read this morning in chapter 6, if you want to open up your Bibles. Let's read this together. It pleased Darius, king, to appoint 120 satraps, maybe what we would call mayors or governors, regional leaders. 120 satraps to rule throughout the kingdom with 3 administrators over them, one of whom was Daniel. Daniel was not a Babylonian. He wasn't a Mede. He wasn't a Persian, but he had worked for years for the Babylonians. He had been faithful. He had served the government, and Darius saw a good leader, saw someone trustworthy in Daniel when he met him and said, yeah, you stick with me, you work for me. The satraps were made accountable to them so that the king might not suffer loss. Whoever the king was, whether it was King Nebuchadnezzar early on in Daniel for all those first decades that Daniel and his friends were in exile, then the other kings of Babylon, and now the Medes and the Persians have come in. The satraps were made accountable to the administrators and the administrators to the king so that the king might not suffer loss. Now Daniel so distinguished himself among the administrators and the satraps by his exceptional qualities that the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. This Jewish boy, decades ago, this Jewish old man, wasn't Babylonian, wasn't Mede, wasn't Persian. The king thought, I'll put this guy in charge of everything, then I won't have to worry about anything. But at this, the administrators and the satraps, the other government officials, tried to find grounds for charges against Daniel in his conduct of government affairs, but they were unable to do so. They could find no corruption in him because he was trustworthy and neither corrupt nor negligent. He didn't lie, he didn't cheat, he didn't steal, he didn't drink too much, he didn't take a little bit off the top, he didn't play the lottery with government money, he didn't go to the racetrack, he didn't have a drug problem, he didn't have all of these things. They were looking for a way to accuse him and disqualify him, but they could find nothing. Verse 5. Finally, these men said, "We'll never find any basis for charges against this man Daniel unless it has something to do with the law of his God." So these administrators and satraps went as a group to the king and said, "May King Darius live forever." The royal administrators, prefects, satraps, advisors, and governors have all agreed. Well, not exactly. Have all agreed that the king should issue an edict and enforce the decree that anyone who prays to any god or human being during the next 30 days, except to you, your majesty, shall be thrown into the lion's den. Did you catch that? The long and short of it is, you're awesome. Why don't you make a law that nobody can pray to any god except for you, O God King, for 30 days. And if anybody does, then they'll be thrown into the lion's den. Now, this wasn't exactly a one-off. Many ancient kings were deified. They saw them as kings. Think of the Caesars. Think of the Pharaohs. People saw them into the Middle Ages, into the Renaissance, in Europe. If you were a king, you were seen as godlike and elevated, and what we might even see as worshipped. Now, your majesty, issue the decree and put it in writing so that it cannot be altered in accordance with the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be repealed. So King Darius put the decree in writing. A couple of things. First of all, the Medes and the Persians had what we might loosely, imperfectly call a constitutional monarchy. In other words, the Babylonians, if you're the Babylonian king and you want to build you a statue and have everybody worship it, and if they don't worship it, they throw you in the fire, you just did it. You're a dictator, you're a megalomaniac, you could just do whatever you wanted to. The Medes and the Persians, their style of government was a little bit more. The leaders still led, the leaders still had incredible power, but it was in some way constitutional. They were a people of laws. You see this also in the book of Esther, when the king there is kind of hoodwinked into writing a law, and you're bound to it. Darius here has written a law, and he's going to sign this law. If anybody prays to anybody but me for 30 days, they'll be cast into the lion's den. Now, you might think that you're the king, you can do what you want. They couldn't. He wrote a law, and as soon as that law was written and made official, it was binding. Even the king couldn't overturn what he had said was going to happen. Daniel doesn't go looking for trouble. Most of you know the rest of this story. We're going to get to the rest of the story in a minute. Daniel doesn't go looking for trouble. He's not out passing out tracts on the corner. He doesn't have a microphone and a tiny little speaker, yelling, "Turn or burn." He's not making everybody pray to his God or worship his God or come to Sunday school. He's just doing his thing. But the other administrators, the satraps, the government officials, they are jealous of him. Something about him puts them off, and now he's been elevated. Now he's getting attention. Now the word on the street is that the king might put him in charge of everything. And they can't have that. There are people, boy, I hate to break this to you on a beautiful, thunderstormy Sunday morning. There are people out there that just won't like it when you live out your faith. Most people don't care what you do. But there are some people out there that really aren't going to like it. And whether you do it low key or out loud, they just won't like it. Most of the time, that'll be small and petty. They'll just talk about you behind your back, or they'll roll your eyes. But occasionally, it'll be big and consequential. Sometimes doing what is right will make life difficult for you. Sooner or later, most of us will be put in some sort of trial dilemma and will have a choice to make. We just sang a song that said, "When the sea is raging." Your sea may be raging this morning. And your sea may be raging because of you. Your sea may be raging because of somebody else. Your sea may be raging because of our culture. The sea may be raging because of a relationship or your faith. But sooner or later, we're going to have a trial and a hardship and a choice to make. Verse 10. Now, when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, he went home to his upstairs room where the windows opened toward Jerusalem. 3 times a day he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to his God, just as he had done before. Then these men went as a group and found Daniel praying and asking God for help. So they went to the king. They went to the king and spoke to him about his royal decree. Did you not publish a decree that during the next 30 days, anyone who prays to any god or human being except to you, your majesty, would be thrown into the lion's den? Why, yes, I believe I did. The king answered, the decree stands in accordance with the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be repealed. Then they said to the king, Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, your majesty, or the decree you put into writing. He still prays 3 times a day. When the king heard this, he was greatly distressed. Why? Because he's got a good guy who's working for him. Daniel is good at his job. He's trustworthy, where everybody else in the government, it seems, is conspiring and personal and looking for ways to edge and get ahead. Daniel is a faithful servant of the king. When the king heard this, he was distressed, and he was determined to rescue Daniel and make every effort until sundown to save him. He tried to find a loophole. He's the king. You could think, nah, never mind, just rip that law up, but he couldn't. Their style of government, their form of government, once the law was written, it was in stone. And it could not be changed. He tried. He called in his lawyers. He looked for a loophole, but he couldn't change it. Then the men went as a group to King Darius and said, remember, your majesty, that according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, no decree or edict that the king issues can be changed. So the king gave the order. And they brought Daniel and they threw him into the lion's den. The king said to Daniel, may your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you. A stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the rings of his nobles, so that Daniel's situation might not be changed. Then the king returned to his palace and spent the night without eating, without any entertainment being brought to him, and he could not sleep. It kept him up at night. I don't know that indicates that Daniel was his best friend. I don't know that they were fishing buddies. I don't know that they played racquetball every Tuesday morning. But Daniel had found value in a heathen king because how he lived his life, how he served, how he worked. Every job can be holy work. Do you know that, right? Pastor Hunter today down in Mobile, Alabama, is pastoring a church. That's holy work. But I've known a lot of people who work on farms and factories and for governments and police officers and fire people and doctors and lawyers and such. That's holy work. It can be as if unto God. That's how Daniel lived his life. Verse 19, at the first light of dawn, the king got up and hurried to the lion's den. And when he came near the den, he called to Daniel in an anguished voice, Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions? And I'd like to think that Daniel just went quiet for about 40 seconds. I'm kidding. I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. All good in here. I don't know that he did. I would have done that. Daniel answered, may the king live forever. My God sent his angel and he shut the mouths of the lions. They've not hurt me because I was found innocent in his sight, nor have I ever done any wrong before you, your majesty. The king was overjoyed and gave orders to lift Daniel out of the den. And when Daniel was lifted from the den, no wound was found on him because he had trusted in his God. Now, often when you hear a sermon about Daniel in the lion's den, you talk about Daniel in the lion's den. You talk about the lions, and you talk about the fear, and you talk about the stuff, and that's all a great sermon. I've preached that sermon before. It's great. Today, it's not really about the lions. At the king's command, the men who had falsely accused Daniel were brought in, and they were thrown into the lion's den, along with their wives and children. And before they reached the floor of the den, the lions had overpowered them and crushed all their bones. Oy vey. Then King Darius wrote to all the nations and peoples of every language in all the earth, may you prosper greatly. I issue a decree that in every part of the kingdom, people must fear and reverence the God of Daniel, for he is the living God and he endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed. His dominion will never end. He rescues and he saves. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lion's den. How great thou art. I mean, he just leads a worship. So Daniel prospered deep into his 80s during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. I got hung up on one verse. I want you to go back and look at verse 10. So there's the conspiracy, there's King Darius, and Darius recognizes something special in Daniel, and Daniel has served for decades and decades. He's good at his job, he's trustworthy. And he elevates him to be one of the administrators over the governors and mayors and the smaller provincial governors. And Darius so values him that he's going to elevate him to just basically run the country for me because I can trust you. And there's a conspiracy against Daniel, and they come and they trick the king, appealing to his ego, or, I don't know, but come, hey, write a law that nobody prays to anybody but you for the whole month. Well, won't that be great? Okay, that sounds great. And he writes the law, and the law can't be broken. And that's a pretty, if you pray to anybody but the king for the next month, you're going to die. And it's not going to be a good death. If I had a top 10 ways to die, this would not be one of them. Thrown to the lions. And so what does Daniel do? Verse 10. When Daniel heard, when he learned that the decree had been published, what does he do? He went home. He went to his upstairs room where the windows opened toward Jerusalem. And 3 times a day, like he did yesterday, like he did 2 days ago, like he did last week, and like he did last year, like he did 10 years ago, and 20 years ago, and 40 years ago, and 50 years ago. 3 times a day, he got down on his knees, and he prayed, giving thanks to his God, just as he'd always done. Daniel was given a choice. Daniel could have complied. He actually could have prayed, okay, come on, man. I'm 80-something years old. I'm too old for this. He could have prayed. He could have just gone silent. He could have complied with the law, or he just could have, been a little more discreet. Shut the windows. Don't make a big deal out of it. Or he could continue to pray. What he didn't do, he didn't go on an epic rant on social media. Okay? He didn't throw, every once in a while, it's, after elections, after the bachelor or bachelorette picks the wrong person, it's anytime Taylor Swift does anything, people go on these great rants, usually in their car seats, in their car. They just get their phones, they turn it toward them, and then they scream at their own phones. And then they put it out to their 15s of followers. And the more off the rocker crazy they are, the more views they get, and it's passed around and passed around. Daniel doesn't do that. Daniel doesn't go to CVS and get a poster board and a stick and say, boo to the King Darius. Bad laws are not good for the Medes and the Persians. He doesn't start a GoFundMe. Come to my defense. I'm the good guy. They're the bad guys. He doesn't start coming up with things to counterattack his enemies. When Daniel learned that the decree had been published, he went home to his upstairs room where the windows opened toward Jerusalem. 3 times a day, he got down on his knees and he prayed. He just did what he'd always done. And the word I got hung up this week, I'm not sure the word is in Daniel chapter 6, but Daniel had peace. He was not in a peaceful situation. There's nothing peaceful about being threatened with death by lion. This isn't fair. Again, I hate to break it to you. You're going to be in situations, it's just not fair. You're going to have people conspire against you. Sometimes when we live out our faith, people will take shots at us. Sometimes life's us. What do we do? Daniel was presented with that situation. What did Daniel do? He just did what he did yesterday. He doesn't do anything new. For the life of me, I'm not sure Daniel if he's taking his resting heart, his resting, what is it? Resting what? Heart rate. If he's taking his resting heart rate, yesterday after his Maxwell House, it's whatever. And today, with the threat of death by lion, it's exactly the same. They're going to kill me if I pray. It's 7:45. It's time to pray. He does what he'd always done. He had peace in the midst of trouble. When he was taken from his homeland in Jerusalem and taken into exile, what am I going to do? I'm going to be faithful. In chapter 2, when King Nebuchadnezzar has a dream, and when they can't figure out what the dream was or what it meant, King Nebuchadnezzar decides to kill everybody. What am I going to do? Guys, let's talk about it. Let's pray about it. Last week, the writing on the wall. What does this mean? The enemy is at the gates. The whole kingdom, everything I've known for the last 60 years is about to crumble around us. What do? I tell the king what the Lord has shown me to tell the king. And now threatened by death by lion, what do? He had peace. Daniel was, the word we might use is faithful. Daniel was faithful. But in this sense, he just kind of did the next right thing. It's one of my favorite kind of leadership principles or personality principles. He just does the next right thing. You might recognize the name Elizabeth Elliot. Elizabeth Elliot was a missionary. She and her husband, Jim, were missionaries to Ecuador years ago, I believe back in the 50s. And Jim was murdered by spear, which also ranks up there with one of the ways I don't want to die. Years later, she came back to Ecuador to continue to tell them about Jesus. She said this: in an overwhelming, troubled world, do the next thing. I don't know any simpler formula for peace, for relief from stress and anxiety than the very practical, very down-to-earth word of wisdom, do the next thing, that has gotten me through more agonies than anything else I would recommend. How do you live like that? How do you live like that? Very few of you this morning are being threatened by death by lion that I'm aware of. But many of you are in trial. Many of you are in troubled times. Some of you need to prepare because trials are coming. Oh no, what's going to happen? What's going to happen if I lose my job? What's going to happen if I go through financial difficulty? What's going to happen if my body breaks? What's going to happen if I lose this or this or this? What's going to happen? What am I going to do? Those are fair questions. Questions that would put me into panic somehow. And Daniel's not a superstar. He just does the next thing. And the next thing for him, the morning, I can just picture him reading his newspaper. New law. Nobody praised anybody but the king for 30 days. It's time for prayer. How do you live like that? How do you prepare for trials, threats, hard times, lions? How can you have peace like that? I've shared with you before. One of my favorite Roy Disney quotes. It's not hard to make decisions when you know what your values are. When you know what your values are. And Daniel knew what his values were. It was 7:45, it's time to pray. It's noon, it's time to pray. It's 6:30, it's time to pray. Well, there's a law that says if you pray, they're going to throw you in the lion's den. That's awesome. It's time to pray. Do the next thing. Be, Daniel chapter 6, faithful. I can do that. Now, I'm going to do it with a little bit of a higher resting heart rate than Daniel. I'm going to worry. I'm going to worry about the lions. I'm going to worry about the law. I'm going to worry about the threat. I'm going to worry about all the people that are out to get me. I'm going to worry in a different way than what we see in Daniel. But does he do anything big and huge and special? No, he just did what he did yesterday. He was faithful. He had pre-decided how he was going to live his life. And I think you can too. Would you stand up with me? The lions get the headliner here in the story. The lions are the show. But I just love picturing, little old man Daniel, government worker, being targeted and threatened. Real danger. The law is the law, and the king himself can't change it. He just looks at his Apple Watch and says, it's time to go upstairs and pray. And he just does the next thing. When your world shakes, and it will, live out your faith in the way that you have decided to live out before that trial comes, before that threat comes, before the trouble comes your way. Live faithfully. Follow Jesus, no matter where that path takes you. And somebody, someday, please remind me too. When the world screams and threatens and the rage comes, and the threat is real, and the trial is overwhelming, do the next right thing. For Daniel, it was prayer. And the hero of the story, God shows up. Daniel's spared. Ha ha. The good guys don't always win. Oh, I hate that. The good guys don't always win in every Bible story. Here, God comes and miraculously shuts it wasn't that the lions weren't hungry. End of the chapter. They were. But Daniel's miraculously spared. I can do that. I can pray at 7:45 because it's the next right thing to do. I can be faithful like that, not in big, huge, vocal, outlandish steps forward, but in quiet faithfulness. Come what may. I'd imagine somebody needs to hear that this morning. Let's pray.